Ahoy, veterinary professionals! The MVMA's 133rd convention beckons you to embark on a journey of professional enrichment from January 30th to February 2nd, 2025 at the Holiday Inn Executive Center in Columbia, Missouri. Join us for Vet Voyage, sailing the seas of veterinary excellence. Dive deep into over 24 hours of continuing education with tailored tracks covering companion animals, food animals, equine topics, and an array of specialized fields including practice management and veterinary technician sessions. Enhance your expertise with interactive labs and live seminars like equine care and bovine nutrition. Explore our bustling exhibit hall featuring over 60 vendors showcasing the latest in veterinary, technology, and services. Test your luck with exciting door prizes or learn about cutting-edge developments and human rabies titer testing available for the first time at the convention. Celebrate milestones at our foundation reception. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Missouri Veterinary Medical Foundation and the 25th anniversary of its annual drawing. Enjoy an evening of hors d'oeuvres, fun, and the chance to win $10,000 and other cash prizes. Be inspired by our keynote speaker, Dr. Eleanor Green, as she discusses adaptability, the new core competency. Don't let the ship sail without you. Register now at www.movmaconvention.com and anchor yourself in the future of veterinary medicine. The MVMA's 133rd convention is your port for discovery, learning, and unparalleled networking opportunities. It's Wednesday, November 13th. This episode will be live on November 20th, coming out in a week from recording today. And welcome to the Veta Podcast. Good morning, Kale.
Morning, Steven.
Morning, Lindo. You can't hear Lindo. He doesn't have his mic on. He claims that, but he put it on the floor. So Lindo is here, and we will harass him, and we'll get to see his smirks and you know, a little nervous twitches as we harass him. So
shout out to the old producer, Danny. It's his birthday today.
Hey, happy birthday, Danny. All right, we are jumping into episode 20.
Yeah.
Man, episode 20. And there's a lot in the news about the veterinary industry slowing. So our podcast today is about, is the veterinary industry slowing? So we're going to dive into the current state of the veterinary industry, external economic factors, industry-wide trends, and strategies to mitigate, the potential of that happening. So got a lot of great info to get into today. Excited about that. And, it's critical today because I think as we put together today's podcast, today's episode, today's outline, articles we researched, is that my voice said the one thing that's certain is uncertainty. And I think what the data is going to show, there's conflicting data out there amongst AVMA, the AVMC, AHA, Mars, right, the largest owner of veterinary practices in the world. There's conflicting quotes from, strategic partners, but I think everyone agrees on that maybe we're in more of an uncertain waters now today than we have been post-COVID, new administration coming on. So, the one thing you can do always, which is smart, is to be ready. So we're going to get into that today. We'll break down the articles and some good data to look at. Hey, we've got some people that have contributed today, quote-wise. We're going to dive into that. We have Dr. Peter Weinstein, which excited to have his quote. We have Dr. Jim Schisler and Dr. Kent Thornberry, and we're going to get into those. We might hear from Julie Braun, the executive director of the Missouri Veterinary Medical Association, too. So I'll be excited to dive into that. Hey, as always, hope everyone likes and subscribes to us. Click that follow button, depending on what medium you're listening or watching this on. We'd love to continue to get the likes and subscribes up. The more we can do that, the more better content we can bring to educate, advocate, and inspire the private practice owner. Are you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll.
All right. Okay, so the current state of the veterinary industry, we've talked about this for the past couple episodes. We've seen client counts down, but we haven't seen revenue down because people have priced accordingly and appropriately. What I want to laugh about, though, is that I saw somebody talking about on the news, I got a $3,000 dental. And I'm like, where the heck did someone get a $3,000 dental? This is someone out of like Denver, Colorado. And I'm going, Now that is crazy.
Well, what they probably didn't tell you is the complications that they had during that surgery.
No, he said a basic dental with a few teeth pulling.
Okay.
$3,000. I mean, so someone did get charged $3,000, but you think about a complicated dental of any of our practices. Depending on where they're at, I don't know. They get $1,200. You ever see $1,200 one?
No, I mean I just had 2 done in the same day, and it was less than $1,000
for 2.
Yeah.
So now, speaking here in the Midwest, but Denver's no different. So yeah, that's the problem, is that the current state of the veterinary industry also has a lot of interesting information where someone's going to hear that, oh my gosh, if I go to the veterinarian, am I going to pay $3,000 for a dental? So I'm not even going to get a dental. I'm not even going to ask. I'm scared to ask because I don't want to tell the veterinarian no because it's going to be $3,000. So state of the veterinary industry, and we talked about uncertainty, that just throws more uncertainty in the veterinary industry.
The thing that's interesting to me is like you mentioned earlier, the conflicting things that people are saying. I see that amongst my clients as well. I have some people that are booked out, can't shove another person in, can't see another patient. I have some people that are, like, hey, yeah, we could take everybody we want to get.
Yeah.
And it's like there's not a trend of it's this type of practice, it's this demographic, it's this.
You're not
thing.
seeing rural versus urban difference. You're seeing it's not a.
It's scattered.
Scattered.
It's like you threw salt and pepper on a table and like looked at that. And so it's interesting to me how some clinics are thriving right now, or I guess you consider it thriving. They might want to break, but the other ones are actively like, hey, we need more people in the door.
Well, it's interesting. You got USA Today, and this is an article from the spring, but said veterinary care, animal hospitals are more scarce. That's bad for pets. Do you think there's any of those areas, though, that are really booked or less competition around them? Does that show up, or can you say? I mean, we have to look
no.
We have a market analysis.
Well, I know the answer, and to be honest with you, the answer it would be no. I mean, there is competition around in the same town, a lot of times within miles of each other. And so, it's not like there's a desert in these areas that's forcing everybody to be booked up.
Okay.
Maybe one.
Yeah,
not a trend.
But if I understand what you're saying, there's not a trend based on it's in urban, suburban, or rural, and they all seem to have competition around them, but it's different based on.
Yeah, some clinics are doing very, very well, and some clinics are doing.
All right, let me ask you: are some better at calling and getting people in the door than others?
Well, I think some are more proactive in their trying things. It's like, hey, we tried this a while and it didn't work, so we're going to try something else.
Yeah.
Some others are reactive to, like, hey, this is kind of going on and we're just going to see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so I obviously always would advocate for a proactive stance on any sort of planning or any sort of thing that a clinic would want to implement is to actively go out and get that. Because during COVID, we were so used to the doors always being knocked on. We don't ever have to worry about going out and getting clients. And now that might change.
Yeah.
Like, that is changing. And so I've told several people, it's your responsibility to make sure your book's full now.
Yes.
We're not going to actively always make sure it's full because
there's not a line out the door.
Off the hook.
There's not a line out the door.
And so, it's our responsibility now to look at this and say, hey, 2 weeks out, what do I have on the calendar? How many should I have on the calendar 2 weeks out? And if I don't have that, why don't I have that? And so, it's probably going to take an investment in your front staff and your team there to make sure and incentivize them properly to make sure we're getting as many people through the door as possible.
Share the story. Share a good story of why you need to get people through the door and what's important to the practice. And what's interesting that it said that 97% of pet owners in the U.S. Say that pets are part of the family. So, why do you want them to come to the door? Because the pet's not able to tell the owner that I've got an issue. Only way you're going to really know, or before it becomes too bad or obvious, right? You got to take them in, have them checked out and checked on, and people get busy. People forget it's the responsibility of the veterinary practice to get that done. So I think the state of the veterinary practice, good part to add what you're saying is, come off the COVID. We've talked about this. Come off COVID, where people have stimulus checks. They got some extra money in their pockets from the government, and they're doing things they've never done before. Plus, they got time on their hands, right? They're around their animals. So they did some things. Now that's done, and so it's time to get back to we're jumping ahead probably a little about what you do to, we can dive in that a little later. But I thought that was interesting to, talk about, hospitals are more scarce. And there is that is a state of the veterinary industry where, maybe what we may not be seeing is that maybe a community over from them, they don't have a veterinary hospital anymore. We're not considering 20, 30 miles away. Mm-hmm. And it's only going to take 10 a week to make a difference, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like, so it doesn't take a ton to make a difference in that practice, visit-wise, weekly. So there may be that kind of lead-on effect going on in the veterinary industry, for sure. So current state, I think that current state's, even though we're seeing some of these headwinds, the current state's good because as the Pew Research backs up what the USA Today says is that 62% of United States has a pet. 62%. Now that's from goldfish, all the way to dogs and cats. But dogs are the largest amount, then cats, and then small percentages with birds and reptiles and every other pet that there is out there. But it gave some pretty interesting statistics about, I think what's considered is income-wise, okay? So state of the veterinary industry, this was an interesting graphic. It says most pet owners see their pets as part of their family, and many say they're on the same level as humans. So they broke it down by lower income, middle income, and upper income. The percent that say yes as much as a human member, and then yes, but not as much as a human member. So everyone's still saying like that 97% of people say yes, it is that. Interesting, lower income, 64% say yes as much as a human member. Middle income, 46%. Upper income, 43%.
20% difference.
Yeah. Isn't that huge?
It's wild.
That's huge. Mm-hmm. And so in the state of the veterinary industry, too, it's like we have to charge appropriately. And the reason you have to charge appropriately, because then when you do have people that need help and care, that maybe can't afford everything, if you're profitable, you're able to help those people. Because if I'm seeing that 64% of lower income really, really care about their pets, that means they really want services to take care of them, but how do they do that? Mm-hmm. So that was a heck of a deal. This article breaks it down by, it's interesting, same question, yes as much as a human member. This talks about married people, living with a partner, divorced, separated, widow, and never married. Married's the lowest at 43%, say yes as much as a human member. The highest is living with a partner. The next highest is never married, which I think you're seeing that trend, right? People are, my pet loves me a lot better than anyone I've ever met. And then divorce separated 54%. So where's the state of the veterinary industry today? I think it shows that, obviously pets matter. The human-animal bond matters. The dogs especially, right? We're talking about dogs here. Because dogs have that connection. Cats don't have that much of a connection with. They're neat. They're fun, right? It's a neat animal to have around. They will pet. Yeah, I think do you have a good connection with any cats?
I love my one cat. Yeah. It's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah. It's rare, though, isn't that? Is it rare to have that much of a connection, like compared to Milo? Is it?
I don't know. It kind of depends on. I don't know that I would weight one over the other.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Milo, but, I let the cat sleep on my lap. I don't let Milo sleep on my lap.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Cats. If you had a dog that size, it might be on your.
Maybe.
But no, interesting on that article. That's Pew Research, so it breaks down a lot. We'll have this article linked on our website, so y'all can take a look at it, because I think it's important to understand the numbers, what the trends are, what people are doing. So other thing too was the state of shelters. The animals in the shelters were adopted, and then this AHA has using data to decrease pet relinquishment, because we've seen an uptick now in pet relinquishment. And this really gets down into looking at there's holes in the data, because when someone brings a pet in, it could be because they can't afford the care. They'll relinquish a pet because of affordability, right? Just I care so much about this pet, I need to take it to the shelter. Maybe they will be able to take care of the pet. Now, they said the holes in the data. Interesting is that the shelters tend to just check that as the reason if no one gives a reason. So it's hard to understand data. The fact is, pet relinquishment's going up because of affordability, whether it's, or where you don't live. I might move to a new apartment, and that new apartment doesn't allow for, animals, those kinds of things. So understanding that, why maybe our count's down. Visits are down some places because there's some pet relinquishment. That only takes a few pets to make a difference. But pet care isn't down, because veterinarians, those animals still need that care. A lot of shelters have veterinarians, so there's still animals that need care, which gets into, you think if the industry's down, Kale, we would think that we don't need as many veterinarians.
One of the questions, as we've been talking about this, that I had, and we've kind of touched on it, but maybe I'll say it in a different way, is could it be possible that it's not as directly correlated to the economic situation as it is to people's free time that they have? Like, could the time thing have been the biggest driver of the massive influx of things? Because here I am, I'm sitting at home, my employer doesn't really know how to monitor me working from home, so I'm just going to take the dog to the vet whenever I want to, and no one really cares. And so, I don't know that we've really ever thought too in depth on, maybe it's truly not as much about, the economic as it is the time availability of people. Because it feels like I'm busier, and maybe I'm not, but it feels like everyone's busier. It feels like there's so much crap always going on, and during COVID there was nothing. And so it's like, might as well take the dog to the vet because I'm not going anywhere else today. And maybe I'll get to talk to somebody. And so maybe that's it too.
Well, in Missouri, just passed the minimum wage, which also put in the hours of sick pay, right? That an employer needs to provide, which I think is really important. I know a lot of small business associations are up in arms about the minimum wage and the sick pay, but to look at it, maybe if people have the ability to take a day and get paid, they will be able to go and take care of not only themselves, but their animals too, which is a de-stressor. Interesting enough, I tell you a story about the guy carrying the toilet paper in here to the building. So a guy's carrying his box, he's just struggling. And I was like, hey, you okay? Can I get that for you? He's like, I got a hernia. I'm like, well, give me the box. But you know why he hasn't got it fixed? Because he can't afford to take off. And he's like, I've had this thing for 3 years, and it keeps getting worse. I go, yeah.
That's what they do.
It's going to keep... So that might be exactly what it is. Because we all have access to health care, but it's the time to go. You think about that in a personal... How bad are we about doctor's appointments ourselves?
I would hate to admit the last time I've been.
Fair enough. So the state of the veterinary industry, I think that's kind of looking at some external factors there, right? I think, though, what really spurred on today, too, was the question of veterinary shortages in the future. So we have new study. Here I'm going to read the headlines. New study predicts no shortage of veterinarians. Chart of the month, no dire shortage of veterinarians ahead. And there's a study, demand for and supply of veterinarians in the U.S., 2032. So we've got VIN, we've got AVMA, we have the AAVMC, and I got some quotes from people in the industry. And I think that before I jump into the quotes, the VIN and the AVMA have a study out saying there's no dire shortage. But the AAVMC, the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges, says there is. And at the end of the day, it's a little bit uncertain of whether there is or isn't, because, number one, baby boomers are retiring. That's the one. A real big concern is the number of baby boomers that are retiring versus the people that are coming on. Now, we're AVMA saying there isn't going to be a shortage because of the number of colleges coming on board. But the College Association saying that might take care of it, but we still think there's a shortage. But then there's one inside of all these articles, a big company, Mars, that has over 3,000 clinics, hospitals worldwide, says there is. And, the predictor of data is the accuracy of data still may be wrong, right? At the end of the day, it's uncertain. Any of these could be right. We'll only know in 2032 who was right. And someone will look really smart. But I think in my opinion, they're always lucky. And they are smart people, all of them. But I think that if you look at Mars is one that has probably access to the most accurate data because they're the ones controlling their data. Most other things we're looking at is disparate data. As we see disparate data that what we do for our clients is to take disparate data and make sense out of it. Be able to benchmark as accurately as possible. It's not self-reported. It's not, crap coming out of a PIM system that's crap or P&L that's crap. And so when I look at a lot of these data outside of Mars is that they're looking at self-reported data. And so, I would give more leeway to Mars actually on this and say Mars is probably right. If they say there's a shortage coming up,
well, one thing about
they got a lot of money.
Well, one
they
thing
got a lot of
about
money
that
to pay
is
for.
What does
studies.
private equity do really well at?
Predict numbers.
Make money.
Yeah, predict.
They're not gonna.
Well, but that's a private equity family.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Though is like they pay a lot of money to get things right, and so they're not.
Well,
it might lend some credibility more to that stance because they're not going to put themselves in a financial position that's poor.
I want to push back on that. I think that private equity knows how to manipulate numbers for the next buyer. Is what they do. They know how to squeeze something and juice something. I don't want to put Mars in the private equity space because it's a family corporation that's vertically aligned. I'd put them in the corporate box. Just like, I'll be talking about Dr. Thornsberry here in a minute. And, I had a conversation about it. I wrote a blog post, talking about be aware of corporate offers. And those two things, private equity and corporate, get a little intertwined. Kent has CareVet, which is backed by some families. They're making a corporation. They have no intention to take that and sell it to someone else. They're trying to build something. So I think I want to break those up when we talk about. That's why you push back on me. That's what.
Well, no, I just think that when data is self-reported, it tends to be up to the interpretation of the person answering the question.
Yeah.
And so I guess my point is, if Mars is going to put effort into a study to understand the future of their company, it would behoove them to make sure that they got that right.
Yeah.
And so they're controlling their data. They know what's going on inside. Mars is.
Oh yeah.
And so, I guess. Yeah. My point is that they've invested in making sure that
Mars
right.
has. I don't want to give the credence to private equity.
If
you will. I mean, they're for the most part. So looking at this though, Dr. Thornberry, I'll go with his. It's interesting as we were talking through this, question about the veterinary shortage. He said, I believe there are some variables not factored into the AVMA report that is better defined in the AAVMC. Back to what we're saying, we're following the AAVMC on this too. He says, I absolutely agree that more DVMs are graduating and wanting to work fewer hours per week. Say full-time of 30 hours per week instead of 40-plus hours per week, mostly for work-life balance and family needs. You talked about time. Time's valuable. He goes on to say, as discussed in the line on the AAVMC article, our industry is a great profession to shift to part-time work. And so, really highlighting, he's got some, we'll put his quote out there on the website. He said, my concern is, this is Dr. Thornberry, Kent Thornberry CareVet, My concern is I do not see info in the AVMA article that addresses the clinical capacity shift. It's not just about the number of people, it's about the total clinical hours being worked. And he says the full-time equivalent DVM capacity. If DVMs are going to work fewer hours per week on average than their predecessors, then it will take more DVMs to see the same volume of patients per clinical hours. So I agree with him completely on this one. I think he's absolutely right on that. And I always go back to grocery, talk, right? We knew that if we're going to do X dollars per week, we needed X hours. We knew what hours. I didn't see how many people I needed. I knew how many hours I needed. Then I looked at my people capacity and adjusted that way, right? And that's what he's saying. We tend to look at, are you a 4-doctor practice?
Yeah.
Well, how many hour practice are you? That's probably the better question.
That's a much better question.
Yeah, and he's got some great points here about, he mentioned earlier, work hours, lifestyle. How do we come across the suitability of part-time work, professional burnout, right? And which is interesting. There are some studies coming out that burnout is starting to go down. It's still a big deal, but it is starting to go down. Capacity concerns. And here's one thing I do think, and he wrote an article about this, impact of aging pets from the COVID era. He talks about geriatric care, saying that there is going to be a time where, as these pets get into their teens, the people are going to pay more for that kind of care. And so that will drive actually more appointments off of one animal. So not more animals, not a higher patient count, but a higher appointment count. That'll be interesting. He said forecasts of veterinary demand over the next decade, there's expected to be a higher demand for veterinarians due to aging pets, right? Potentially leading to shortage unless new strategies are implemented. So that was Dr. Thornberry. I thought he hit that on the head on that. Now, it's interesting. There's another take, and this is Dr. Jim Schisler. He was an owner at Kirkwood Animal Hospital, which is probably, when he was running it, ran it like a well-oiled machine, hitting all the benchmarks you would want to hit. And he said he's very passionate about ownership and hard work, right? So if you hear this, I want to say we're about viewpoints here, right? So I think it's good to throw different viewpoints and thoughts. He says, Stephen, the profession does not really want to address the work shortage issue. Private practices should embrace the new Colorado law. We'll get into the Colorado law. That's Proposition 129 that passed. So I'm outside his quote. Back to his quote. Corporate ownership has probably irreversibly harmed the profession. The 38-hour work week, the constant referral of interesting cases, no emergencies, avoid urgent care. Veterinarians love to bitch about how hard they work and how little they make. I still work part-time. The lazy attitude is very prominent. I knew some of the founding fathers of corporate medicine. These were highly successful people. They saw corporate medicine as a place for mediocre performers. Private practitioners who are equipped to take care of clients will thrive. Private practitioners will have their pick of the best clients. Private practitioners will be able to charge whatever they want. All you will have to deliver is a good, fair outcome. The bigger question may be, is it ethical to take a client's money for routine care and euthanasia but be unavailable for urgent care and emergency care? Clients, neighbors, and the media only talk about the cost of vet medicine. It's disgraceful. A separate thought. The AVMA and MVMA better wake up. I would suggest that a graduate veterinarian can do a better job of taking care of an animal with telemedicine than a poorly trained nurse vet practitioner, whatever they're going to call them. Do you really need an in-person exam with technology at the level it is today? Dr. Jim Schisler, thank you very much for that quote. He brings up, I love it because he's throwing at his passion, what he's thinking. And yeah, we've got Inspire on here for the private practice owner, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it's like. I think it's like, how do we inspire people to be a private practice owner? To really understand there's a great opportunity there. And like we said, there's good corporates, bad corporates, good small, bad small. But if you look at the data out there, it says private practice owners make more money and are happier. That data's coming out now. Private practice owners make more money and are happier. It just means for everybody. Mm-hmm. We know that. CareVet, Dr. Thornberry, he was a private practice owner, successful. He put CareVet in place to try to help those that didn't want to be private practice owners. So there's both. But what do you think? Thinking about Jim,
the piece that I would push back on, I think, and this is easily debatable, but I don't know that I would say, and he's talking from his experience, and I'm talking from mine. I don't know that I would say it's laziness in veterinarians. I think that people, and I'm speaking maybe for my generation, because in your upper 20s, low 30s, we think about time differently.
Right.
And so, just because I don't want to, work 70 hours a week doesn't mean I'm lazy. Just because I want to spend time with my family or want to go on a vacation doesn't mean I'm lazy per se. It's because I'm making a conscious choice to spend time differently. Mm-hmm. And so that I hear that a lot from an older generation of veterinarians, where it's like, hey, no one wants to work hard anymore. No one wants to do these things. And people say it about my generation, so it's like, I don't know that that's true, because I still think I work hard, but I'm not working 60 hours a week every week. And if the situation needed that, I would do that. But I just don't think it's necessarily fair to paint a generation of folks as lazy.
Yeah, well, it's always a generational difference for sure on how we understand it and work with it. He's frustrated. I think this frustration is coming through with probably how maybe the misunderstanding of generation plus the inspiration. I think there's one thing that's certain today is that we don't have an inspiration point. There's multiple people trying to be an inspiration point, which is great, but at the same time, who's driving the bus? I don't think anyone's driving the bus. But he's got some great points in there. So if I can get to Dr. Peter Weinstein, the Veterinary E-Myth collaboration, wrote that book there, and also he's got a new thing out called the Veterinary Ownership Advocates. We'll put the link out there. He's really advocating for veterinarians to become private practice owners, and it's got some neat courses online. So I think everyone should know Dr. Weinstein's name for sure. So his quote on this: regarding workforce, there is definitely a huge variety of reports. I don't know who is right and who is wrong. And even if there is a right or wrong, there is a maldistribution of veterinarians. There is a maldistribution of veterinarians. Areas of the U.S. are veterinary deserts and can't get DVMs. With the current trending of a flattening of transactions and a level of pushback from clients on a cost of care, the future may be interesting. I think many studies were done in and around the busyness of the pandemic. New studies should be done in the not-too-distant future, once we have normalized somewhat. With more veterinary schools on the horizon, larger class sizes, and states like Colorado, here we go again, right, the Proposition 129, passing the mid-level practitioner law, I think we are headed into unknown territory. Could be good, the demand meets the supply for veterinarians. Could be bad if consumer demand slows and we have too little work and too many veterinarians. Also, it will be interesting to see how the national companies play out. If some are merged, assimilated, or fold, they can impact the workforce. Very interesting times. So, he's echoing what we're saying, for sure, that, hey, it's unknown right now, for sure. So Dr. Weinstein, I appreciate that. Any feedback on Dr. Weinstein?
No, I think he hit the nail on the head. I don't know that I would add anything to his quote. It's over the next several years, we're definitely going to see some interesting trends.
We are. All right. Hey, we're going to break in the middle of these, breaking down the quotes we have from the Missouri Veterinary Medical Association, collaborative effort with the Rural Veterinary Task Force, a statement on what we're talking about here, which is is there a veterinary shortage? So right here, I want to read this. It says I really love it, right here in Missouri in our backyard. So the collaborative effort says, when trying to predict the future, you rely heavily on trends and assumptions. Both reports contain some basic facts, but heavily rely on assumptions to predict the future, and very minor changes of assumptions can result in a completely different outcome and interpretation. It is important to note that these reports are all about companion animal veterinarians. The situation for food animal, equine, shelter, emergency, and some specialties are different. Targeted solutions that address the specific challenges of recruiting and retaining in those areas of veterinary medicine are needed. Who would have known that in 2009, when the University of Missouri CVM class size doubled near the end of the recession, that those graduating veterinarians would be serving the field for retiring veterinarians, pet owners, and producers when the need for veterinarians came to a peak while the world shut down over 10 years later. In a very short few months, veterinarians went from, are we going to survive? From having no business to, are we going to survive? To the onslaught of the business. The boom that followed has been the economic tailwind that has brought us to crossroads to where we are now. So here we sit. The economy is still doing well, but high interest rates to combat inflation have stalled economic growth. Both papers agree that the rate of production of new veterinarians is outpacing the rate of retirement at this point, but the key point of difference is whether the expansion of the profession is enough to keep up with the demand created by the continued 1. Expansion of pet expenditures, and 2. Expansion of pet ownership. Now is the point where we must look at the projections and assumptions and see where the difference is. The AAVMC assumes the expansion in pet expenditures and pet ownership continue at recent rates or accelerate, while AVMA assumes both numbers return to a more historical normal. The question of this podcast is, who is right? With so many variables in the next 5 to 10 years, including aging, pandemic, pets with diabetes, arthritis, or other geriatric diseases, and euthanasia, not to mention the unforeseen events, pandemic, recession, geopolitical turmoil, etc., and additionally the success or failure of the increased number of veterinary schools, just to name a few, how can there be just one answer? The good news for anyone arguing today is we won't know for 5 to 10 years, so we can all claim victory today, and nobody actually knows. Again, a collaborative effort from the Missouri Veterinary Medical Association and the Rural Veterinary Task Force. They pulled this off really quick. I just asked them yesterday to put this on. So I think, without having Kale here, Kale had to jump out. This is getting put in the middle. As I look at is, if I look at what Dr. Thornberry said about the actual hours needed to serve the veterinary care, meaning as we have, new veterinarians working less hours because their work-life balance is different than veterinarians working 40-plus hours before, their needs are different, that is it a number of veterinarians or hours of veterinary capacity? That's one of the big factors we have to look at. The hours they'll be working, the hours they want to work, the hours they work to keep them happy, and the capacity in there to make sure that they don't have burnout, they have best animal care, all those things that come together. As I look through it, this brought up some other thoughts beyond what we've talked about. And so I love having this other viewpoint. And I love what they say too, and what we talk about is that, right now everyone, hey, I'm right. We'll know in 5 to 10 years who was right. It's a new normal that we're trying to, and we say new normal, we don't know what that new normal is. It's some uncertainty here, which again, uncertainty can bring the best and worst out of us. I'm going to shoot for the best out of us. And so thank you again to the Missouri Veterinary Medical Association for a great viewpoint on this hot topic. Let's power forward here. We could go on this topic, and we will talk about this topic more, but let's talk about external economic factors. We already said external economic factors are uncertainty, right? I think that external economic factors we have to think about. One thing is going to be tariffs. So if tariffs are enacted, the question is what will happen? And people don't realize we've already seen this happen without knowing that it was tariffs. Ackerman, it's a law firm. Now, when you Google tariffs in the veterinary industry, nothing
you don't
shows
get much.
up. But if you Google veterinary or tariffs in the healthcare industry, it shows up. Same stuff, right? Gloves, masks, pharmaceuticals, MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds, all these pieces coming from China. And it's interesting, there's something like 65% comes from China, something around there. But in August 8 of 2018, it was how the Trump tariffs affect healthcare. In 2018, there was a 25% tariff on the products. The list covered $250 billion of imports from China. Now, the president has the ability to do this. They don't need congressional oversight. Or Senate oversight, excuse me. They don't need congressional approval. Under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, it gave the president the ability to go, I can slap a tariff on anything coming from another country. Pretty interesting. As a result, hospitals, health systems, physician groups, and other purchasers of certain products will find higher prices. So we've seen higher prices. We've already seen it. So we've already had this jump in high prices, people complaining about that, seeing cost of goods sold, increasing, right? Profits coming down. Because it's hard to pass all that along. The end user, doesn't get that along. Here's the things that are affected. Medical gloves, glass serum bottles, vials, pharmaceutical containers, parts certain medical, surgical, or laboratory sterilizers, photographic cameras, electroradiographs, printed circuitry, ultrasonic scanning electrodiagnostic apparatus used in medical, surgical, dental, or veterinary sciences, and the list goes on. So external factors are going to affect it. We're already talking about high prices. At 25%. So that, I think hopefully everyone understands tariffs. It goes to the end user. The China doesn't pay these. And there's good tariffs and bad tariffs. Mark Cuban does a wonderful job explaining tariffs. There's things that a country will subsidize to sell cheap to another country to try to beat that country up. When that happens, we use tariffs, right? They go, you're cutting that price down 25% in your country to try to beat our country up. I'm just going to tax it 25%, along to the consumer so it's even parity with what we're producing. There's those things that go on. But then there's things we're just using in the system that are part of everyday uses. It's not a competitive issue. It's a capacity issue. It's ability to generate that product. And in COVID, when COVID happened, they talked about this. The reason we didn't have masks and all these things we needed is because we had a trade war with China, and they weren't manufacturing it. They weren't producing it. So when we had a shortage of masks and you couldn't get all this stuff, it was because of that. So when we talk about uncertainty coming up, maybe the tariffs happen, maybe they don't. It's looking like they're going to. It's looking like that trade war is going to happen. And so we'll talk about how to handle that. That's a big factor coming up on that. What are you seeing?
Oh, I guess my question. So on that 25% tariffs on those goods, how much of that is, I guess, still in place, and what would it do again? I guess my question is did those go away? I guess I would need more information on specifically. What was that? What was the length of those?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'll explain why. The price is what it is today. I'm talking about, it doesn't matter if they're still there or not. We're talking about 25 cents increase on every dollar. Plus, you're going to mark it up. You got to mark it up, right? So if you're marking something up 2 times, you got to mark that up so even higher. So the question is, can I even get that amount? So it doesn't. That's irrelevant. It's the moving forward on the pricing. What's going on to move forward, and so some tariffs are in place. I don't have all the data on all the tariffs in place. I know a lot are, because what happens. Here's what does happen. Once they get absorbed into the system, into the trade, do prices come back down very often?
Generally not.
No, they keep charging. Yeah, the rate of inflation's down, but the prices are where they are. People aren't dropping prices. They're not, you don't see that happening. So I understand your question, but I don't think it's relevant, because we're talking about stuff coming in, what it'll go up to. And so that's a big deal. Other external forces, economic forces, what are you seeing out there? What questions you got?
Well, I think one of the other and this may not necessarily be an economic question, but we had a lot of clinics during COVID fall back from their, maybe closing at 7 to closing at 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if we're not seeing effects of that too.
Could be. Yeah, it could, because of the time part, right?
Because of the time. Because it's hey, we they had been doing this for a long time. That was a pretty common thing, that clinics staying open till 7-ish at night. And now I have very few that are still doing that. And so maybe there's a shift in that where it's hey, we're back to a new normal, but maybe there's a less. We could actually probably do a good study on this, but there's actually less total hours that they're open.
So that's kind of external and internal. Meaning external, what are the needs of the person time-wise, right?
Yeah.
And still kind of an internal deal where I can control that, right? So I think we're looking at, that's a factor I can't control, but I need to understand it. I can't control tariffs. If they happen, they happen. I have to absorb the price, pass the price along, whatever that does. And what that can do though too is go, well, if that it does increase the price of care, I might have less because it'd be less animal care because people are really getting outpriced. And the other factor is too that happened is that as immigration such a hot topic, right? They reported that in 2022, $96 billion of taxes was collected from immigrant workforce that received no benefits. So if we deport people, there's $96 billion of taxes gone from those people that work here. And the problem is that those are the people doing the lower jobs, right? For the lower wages. And so you're going to see wage inflation. So not only do we see price inflation on the products, we could potentially see wage inflation, which is what we did see before. When there were immigration bans where people couldn't get in the country to do the jobs that no one else wanted to do, then you had to pay someone twice the price to do the job, to try to get someone to do the job, to keep your bathroom clean or whatever that was. And I don't mean to degrade any job. A job's a job. I think someone does a job's great. So there's some external factors that'll be really interesting coming up to see how it affects it. So to push forward, one of the last big points here is how do we look at strategies to mitigate the economic impact? And Kale, you said, one of them was pretty important earlier.
What were you talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like you got to build your war chest.
You do.
You got to stock up cash.
Yeah.
If we're looking at, hey, we don't know if the industry is slowing, we don't know if we're going to have a surplus or a supply issue of veterinarians. You just have to be prepared and I guess to a point take some responsibility as the owner to make sure that you got cash in the bank account to be able to mitigate any issue whatsoever.
Yeah. And you've got to also put in place proactive steps to look at. I need to look at my labor rate. I need to look at my cost of goods sold. I need to understand those two things because at the end of the day, I need to be able to generate a profit. And in the lean times, it may not be as great of a profit because I can't, I know veterinary practice owners care about their staff, and it's like you can't just cut workforce. It isn't like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Coca-Cola, where like, we're laying off 10,000 people. That just doesn't happen in a private practice. You don't just lay off just half your staff. You can't do that. But what you can do is adjust hours accordingly, and you can, price accordingly. So making sure those two things are in effect. So I think really to wrap this all up, because I know that we've got there's a ton to talk about here. This is the heavy subject. But to wrap up, most important things is how to handle uncertainty. Kale, you're right. You got to have cash in the bank. You got to have a safety net or a line of credit. Mm-hmm. You can also get yourself a line of credit now. If you don't have cash in the bank, maybe think about that. Make sure you understand your numbers. What does it take profitability wise? Looking at your gross profit, understanding your labor, the hours worked that Dr. Thornberry talked about. Capacity. What do you need hours to run your practice? And that data is out there. The data is out there about. Usually we look at production and things like that, right? For how much a doctor should produce, but it's also how many dollars per production hour it takes that you can look at. So those metrics are out there, and we can talk about that at another time. So I think that if we can look at the silver lining of uncertainty, it should make you a better business owner. It'll make you a better business owner. You get to choose now. Who am I going to be as a business owner? And that's what drives me. I can find multiple ways to get driven, but one's a challenge. Bring it on. Bring me on a challenge, and let's go and solve it. Let's go and be better. Let's learn from it. And so at the end of the day, when I see uncertainty, I think of that we can be better as a business owner. As what we look at, we can be more efficient. At the end of the day, while we said just a few things there, cash, line of credit, labor rate, gross profit, keep it simple. Don't stress out about it. Keep that simple, and do what you do to be a successful veterinarian, which is great animal care. Keep it simple, and everything will work out. Well, what do you think? Any closing remarks there? Is that
I think you hit the nail on the head.
I appreciate that. Well, hey, great topic. Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. Thank you, Dr. Schisler. Thank you, Dr. Thornberry, for contributing to the podcast today. We enjoy working with you all, and we enjoy working with the veterinary community. And hey, we're approaching the end of the year. We're going to be on a 1 year of the Vetted podcast pretty soon. We're going to have some exciting things coming out in 2025. So if you like what's going on, please like and subscribe to our podcast, to the YouTube channel. And as always, feel free to let us know questions, comments, feedback. We are about viewpoints. We're not going to be offended. We just gave 3 distinct viewpoints from 3 distinct people. You can see we work with people of a variety of viewpoints. We are not here to say we know everything. There's no way. We started this podcast because viewpoints matter, and you got to listen and discern for yourself what makes sense. So, hey, thanks again for the time today, Lindo. Thanks for producing over there, directing over there, keeping the podcast rolling. And I just wish everybody peace and prosperity.
Peace and blessings.
Later, guys.